Game ain't over. The sun is shining. And it ain't over.
You wanted the best, you got the best from my home studio on Long Island, New York. Welcome to Ian Scotto Rocks. I am your host, Ian Scotto, and we have a great, longer deep dive for you today. So I'd suggest you pour yourself a beverage, sit back, relax, and let's get right into it. Nikki Sixx will always be best known for Mötley Crüe. That's a given. 100 million albums sold, over 1,500 shows played, and a catalog of music that was more recently sold to BMG for an impressive $150 million. Most of those songs written or co-written by Sixx. Even with that, though, it's been evident over the years that Nikki Sixx has never been satisfied just being a part of a nostalgia act and not finding new outlets for his creativity. If you ever saw the Mötley episode of Behind the Music on VH1, which aired back in 1998, Nikki says something about this and where he was at this time in his career. I don't do drugs, I don't drink, but I still burn. I need to know what to do with that energy. So whether it was writing several books, launching his own radio show 6 Sense, or forming his side project 6 AM alongside DJ Ashba and James Michael, the guy has always stayed busy. Anytime Mötley was on a hiatus, a new project would always be happening for him. One of those projects that kept Nikki Sixx busy 20 years back was a short-lived supergroup of sorts alongside Tracii Guns called Brides of Destruction. And that's what we'll be talking about today. Back in 2000, Tommy Lee would leave Mötley Crüe and the band would put out the album New Tattoo. Keep in mind the timeline here. Hair metal was not looked at as very cool at this time. The public was eating up bands like Creed, Limp Bizkit, and Slipknot. Mötley Crüe were old news, and there wasn't yet this hunger for nostalgia from that time like we see today. Compound that with the most recognizable face of the band being out of the picture, and it's not surprising that the album only landed at number 41 on Billboard, and it marked the first and only time that the band didn't even go gold. And if Mötley Crüe wasn't selling, you can imagine how low sales and show attendance were in comparison for a band like LA Guns. Look, I love LA Guns. I did a whole video about them on here, but they don't have near the catalog or name recognition of Mötley Crüe. After putting out Waking the Dead in 2002, Tracii would either leave or get fired from LA Guns. Tracii and Nikki's paths would cross, and thus came the idea for a new band featuring the two icons of the Sunset Strip, but doing something fresh and different. The guys would quickly become the best of buds. Tracii spoke on this in an interview in Chicago around this time period, where he'd speak glowingly of Sixx. It's really weird. I knew Nikki differently before we started talking about the band. He was like an acquaintance, but we used to argue a lot. Just about everything. I don't know why. We always liked each other, but it was always like, who the fuck do you think you are, dude? So I called him up on the phone and said, hey, I know you're not doing anything and I've got a record coming out, but I want to do something else. And he's like, okay, let's do it. Then I had to go on tour, but very quickly we bonded like we'd known each other for 20 years. We'd talk every so often, like every 2 years, but we really didn't know each other until we started talking every day. Getting together, going out to eat, writing music, and stuff like that. It was like I knew him longer than I knew my best friend. It was really cool. And just like through these 2 years, he has become the best friend I have ever had. The guy is amazing. He's very understanding. You know, a lot of times in a band, everyone's got their own little problems, and the other guys don't want to hear your problems. Like, we just want to rock. That's it. And it's a lot more than that. Being in a band is a relationship, and the way that bands have longevity is when they do listen to each other and understand each other. And then you can do it for a long time if you actually like the people as people. And so Nikki is really one of those guys, and because he has obviously a lot of baggage too, there's always a lot to talk about. I think we're both fairly intelligent guys and we understand. And so yeah, he's really become an amazing person in my life. The honeymoon phase between these guys wouldn't last long though, but more on that later. They would come up with the name Cockstar, recruiting different members to complete the lineup. Chris Coles of Edema would be on drums. Maybe they felt having someone from a hot nu metal band at the time would earn them some credibility to a younger crowd. LA Guns bassist at the time, Adam Hamilton, would be on keyboards and rhythm guitars. That guy seems to be a jack of all trades, I have to add. He's been a fixture in and out of LA Guns many times over the years and has played every instrument on various albums in the catalog up until today. On vocals would be an unknown singer at the time, London Legrand, who was working as a hairstylist in LA prior to scoring the gig. Before hitting the studio to record their debut album, though, they'd make several lineup changes. Adam Hamilton would be out, John Corabi, previously of Mötley Crüe, would be in, and then John would be out as well, leaving just Tracii on guitars and no one on keys. Chris Coles would be replaced by an unknown drummer at the time, Scott Coogan, so Sixx, Guns, Legrand, and Coogan would be the final lineup as they'd hit the studio, changing their name briefly from Cockstar to Motor Dog, and then ultimately deciding on Brides of Destruction. In 2004, they would officially hit the studio with producer Steve Bruno to record their debut, Here Comes the Brides. Although Corabi was no longer in the group, he did have a co-writing credit on the track I Got a Gun. Interestingly enough, future writing partner of Nikki with 6am, James Michael, actually had 3 writing credits with Brace Yourself, Natural Born Killer, and the ballad Only Get So Far. It's a great album. It has a pop sensibility to it and a punk rock attitude that you can credit much of that to singer London Legrand, especially on the opening track, Shut the Fuck Up. A couple of weeks before the album dropped in March of 2004, I remember staying up late as a young Mötley Crüe fan to watch them perform on Jay Leno. Yeah, so I was really excited to see them on Jay Leno, and I swear I remember this. During the opening monologue, Jay Leno, with his little bobblehead, where, hey, we're having a great show for you guys tonight. I definitely can't do Jay Leno. I'm no Frank Caliendo. I don't have the chin, right? I don't have the chin to be Jay Leno, because I've heard you fuckers in the comments sometimes be like, who's this chinless idiot? So, I don't know. I can't change my facial structure, guys. Some of you guys are some serious bullies in the comments, and you hurt my feelings, okay? But no, I'm no Jay Leno. But anyway, I point this out because I remember he was talking in the opening monologue about seeing brides rehearse, and they were playing the song Shut the Fuck Up, and he was like, I don't know how they're going to perform this during the show unless we bleep out the entire hook every time they sing it, which was really weird, like weird choice of what to perform on a nationally syndicated late night show. Pretty much every other song on the album doesn't have a ton of cursing, and they had definitely more commercially viable songs on the album, so I don't know why they chose that or whose choice it was. I think back 20 years ago, because I lived it, like, if you had a song called Shut the Fuck Up, it was a lot more rebellious and edgy, and now everything is cursing. Everywhere you go, and every song that's on the radio has a ton of cursing, so there's nothing edgy about it anymore. So that's definitely lost its edge. But nonetheless, why choose that song? So when they performed it live, they changed the chorus to Shut the which you could find on YouTube. But like, dude, pick a different song. Not the best introduction to the band, in my opinion. So as you can see here, they definitely were trying to look way more of the time and not look like a dated nostalgia act. London Legrand looks very punk rock, and you can see Scott Coogan there with those ridiculous spikes looking more like a member of Mudvayne or something. Anyway, the album would debut at only 92 on Billboard, but I really loved this album, and it came out at the height of my Mötley Crüe fandom as well. More on that later. The songs were really catchy. Some had a positive message, like I always loved the line from Life, "Don't let the negative steal the blue out of the sky." The last track on the album, Only Get So Far, was actually a ballad that Sixx tried to pitch to Tim McGraw and Faith Hill that he ended up using instead for Brides. I dig the song, and I love what they did with it. A couple of months after this, they'd go on tour with Amen, and I have to be a little self-indulgent here and tell you about my experience seeing them play at Starland Ballroom in New Jersey on that tour, because it's quite possibly the most memorable night of my life. I do not bullshit you guys here. Here's what happened. I went out to New Jersey to hang out with my friend Jay, who was older. And he is probably single-handedly the man responsible for getting me into all this and my love of 80s hair metal. So thank you, Jay. He was a camp counselor on a travel teen tour that I was a part of, summer camp. And he was actually the chef, very cool guy, but he was older. So I went with him, I went with his brother, and he was over 21 at the time. I was only 17. And we saw the local opener, who I don't remember who they were, and about to go on, I believe, was Beautiful Creatures. I was looking this up because it's kind of interesting. A member of Beautiful Creatures was actually DJ Ashba, but not at that time. But as we all know, DJ Ashba went on to do a lot of stuff with Nikki Sixx. It was Joe Lestay's project, though. So if you're a fan of Bang Tango, his band. Anyway, before Beautiful Creatures goes on, way before Amen is on and everything, Jay says to me, which you're a bad fucking influence, Jay. He's like, hey, you want me to grab you a beer or something while you're here? And look, I'm 38. I've been told I look younger. I don't know, maybe I'm just complimenting myself here, but when I was 17, I could guarantee you I looked like I was practically 12. And so, yeah, he offers to get me a beer, and I'm like, I don't know, man, I'm probably going to get kicked out of here or something. Let me just chill. And he's like, no, you're good. I know security here. Sure enough, I take one sip of a beer. They grab me by the shoulder, security, and they're like, you're out of here. They take my name down from my ID so that I can't get back into the concert. And I'm hanging out outside by where the tour buses are. And even though this was May in New Jersey, it was nighttime and it was starting to get chilly. And I'm out there, I think, in a t-shirt. And I'm like, this sucks. Came all the way to New Jersey from Long Island to see Nikki Sixx and Brides of Destruction. And now I'm going to miss this entire concert. All I saw was some local opener that I don't give a shit about. So as I'm waiting out there in the cold, one cool thing does happen. I see Nikki Sixx get out of his tour bus, and I tell him the story. And he goes, look, man, I'm going to try to get you back in, but I got to run for an interview. And he does walk inside the venue to do an interview, and I'm talking to some guy working security in the parking lot. And he goes, man, do you really think Nikki Sixx is going to get you back into that show? And I said no, but you know what? It at least did something positive for me tonight. I got to meet Nikki Sixx, so that's a pretty cool story. As I'm telling him this, probably a few minutes later, Nikki Sixx comes out of the venue, and he hands me a VIP laminate, and he goes, here you go, kid. Have fun. Go back into the show. And someone actually stopped me before, and they're like, I don't know if we can let him back in. The venue kicked him out, and someone else who was a part of the staff is like, no, Nikki said he can come back in. He's allowed back in. And I watched that entire show from the side of the stage. Not the side of the stage. It was actually like a VIP area right in front of where the stage was. And I was next to Donna D'Erico, Nikki Sixx's wife at the time. So that's as VIP as it gets. And it goes down as one of the most memorable shows. Not only did they play those songs from the Rise to Destruction album, the first one, because that's all that was out at the time. So to complete the set, they played some Mötley Crüe classics like Live Wire and a few LA Guns songs, and it was a hell of a show. Now, you may think I'm bullshitting and that I'm making up this story. I do have some of the receipts, and I can assure you this is a real story. I have a VIP laminate from the B.O.D show. I don't know where it is. I actually went to my parents earlier today since they live the town over, and I didn't see it there. It might be somewhere in this apartment. I don't know, but I have it. But what I do have is I spoke about this on my podcast, Battle Line podcast, about a tweet I had, which we could show you right here on screen. And Loudwire tweeted out back in August of 2023, have you ever been kicked out of a concert? Fess up. What'd you do? And I told that story, and I talked about this on Battle Line podcast with my other host, Chris Peranto, who you may know as one of the Benghazi attack survivors. So anyway, I tell this story, and as you can see here, this is what I originally tweeted. I'll respond to this since it's a pretty epic story. Brides of Destruction, New Jersey, May 8th, 2004. Got kicked out for drinking underage before they went on. Saw Sixx in the parking lot and told him what happened. He got me back in. Got to thank Nikki Sixx here. at this work many years later. So here's the thing. When Nikki got me back in, I said, dude, I will always have your back. And I've stuck true to that. You know, when anyone says Nikki Sixx is a dick or anything like that, I can tell you he's definitely not. So many years after that, I went on to work at Sirius XM, and Nikki Sixx was there, and it was like, I have to get a picture with him, even though I'm not board hopping him or anything. So tell him about the story, and I told him how I now have a Mötley Crüe tattoo on my back, which I probably got 2 or 3 years after that. And once again, I was like, dude, I always have your back for that. And he was like, it's awesome. So I took this picture with him, and, you know, I love that I have this picture with Nikki Sixx. So I tweeted it out to Loudwire, and then since I tagged Nikki Sixx on this, he actually wrote, as you can see there, I remember. And there's Chris responding to what a cool story that is. Now, does he actually remember this happening? I don't know. I think it's possible because he talks about in The Dirt, if you read The Dirt, how at the time during 1994 when they put out the album with John Corabi, that outside one of the radio stations were just a few kids looking to get tickets. And he was reflecting how if this was just a few years ago during Dr. Feelgood, it would be like hundreds and hundreds of kids outside the radio station. And here we were, and it was just 3 or 4 dudes. Brides of Destruction 10 years after that was kind of one of those periods, I feel like. So it may have been memorable that he met someone outside the venue and got them back in. It was certainly memorable for me, and I really feel blessed that all those years later I got to work at Sirius XM and do stuff in the industry and get to reflect on it with him many, many years after that concert. Following that U.S. tour, Brides would go on to play Germany, England, Ireland, Italy, Norway, Sweden, Switzerland, Austria, Belgium, Japan, and Australia within a span of only 2 months. So that's a pretty massive world tour. That would be it for Nikki Sixx, though, because there were talks of Mötley Crüe reuniting, and we all know that Mötley Crüe is the cash cow. So he was out of the band after only 3 months of touring, essentially. This is where the shit really hits the fan with a rift starting between Tracii Guns and Nikki Sixx. As Mötley Crüe would announce their return, they'd release a new single for their greatest hits compilation called If I Die Tomorrow. To put it lightly, Tracii Guns was not impressed by it. He'd post the following on Metal Sludge's gossip board. And yeah, that's how stuff got around in the hair metal community long before Twitter. So he wrote, "This new song sucks donkey's ass, elephant's ass, and my mom's ass. Vince's voice has never sounded better," and they made him sing this shit. Wait, I'm interrupting here. His voice has never sounded better. Yeah, this was 2004, so he did sound better at the time, certainly better than he does now, let's be honest. "I'm embarrassed. Yes, Nikki's my best friend, but I ain't going along with this one because I would look like a donkey's donkey. Look at it this way. If I brought in a song like that for Brides, I would surely get fired, and Nikki would be very vocal with his opinion as well. That's what friends do. Unfortunately, friends don't always listen to each other. On the flip side, I hope it is a major smash hit." I don't know if I believe that he hoped it was a major smash hit. This sounded like quite a cheap shot, and you know what? I think If I Die Tomorrow is a phenomenal song. Of the songs Mötley put out over the past 20 years, that's one of my favorites, I would say. Nikki would respond to this, and though I can't find a direct quote from his rebuttal, I remember him writing how Tracii was a bitter guy that screwed up every opportunity that was handed to him, from Guns N' Roses to LA Guns, and now Brides of Destruction. The Brides would recruit Amen bassist Scott Sorry to replace Nikki Sixx, Amen being the band that opened the first Brides of Destruction tour. I feel like his name is kind of appropriate, Scott Sorry. It may as well have been Scott Sorry, my name isn't Nikki Sixx, because Nikki was easily the biggest draw of this band, let's be honest. They'd also add Ginger from the Wild Hearts as a second guitarist, but he would only be with the band for a few months before departing. In the first quarter of 2005, they'd play 2 shows in Southern California and a show in Dallas, Texas. They'd then go to the studio to record their follow-up album, Runaway Brides, which did actually feature co-writing credits from Nikki Sixx on 3 tracks titled Criminal, This Time Around, and Blown Away. Ginger from the Wild Hearts had 4 writing credits as well, though he also did not play on the album. Production would be handled by UK veteran Andy Johns, who worked with legendary bands like the Rolling Stones, Led Zeppelin, and Van Halen. Johns would unfortunately pass away in 2013. The album would also feature a tribute to Dimebag Darrell entitled Dimes in Heaven. Unlike Here Comes the Brides, the album would not chart at all, and by and large went under the radar. I remember picking up this album when it came out. I was working at Tower Records at the time, and I'll be honest, it's not something I really go back and listen to. I was kind of disappointed, and I thought I would be because Nikki wasn't on it, but the songs were just not up to par with the first album. And the first album, I just think they captured something very special that this didn't. One thing I remember is I felt like a lot of the riffs were lifted from other bands, and that's not a shot at Tracii. He seems to wear his influences on his sleeve like that. I mean, like, one of LA Guns' biggest songs is Never Enough, and that riff is basically just a sped-up version of Hell's Bells, and he doesn't hide that. If you go see LA Guns live, they start with Hell's Bells when they play that, and then they go into Never Enough. But as great of a guitarist as he is, sometimes his songwriting relies on a lot of that. And I felt like on the second album, there was a lot of that where I just listened and I was like, I know this riff from somewhere else. But even beyond that, just not an album I go back to. That's the truth. The band would do a full US tour with Edema to correspond with the album's release. So I guess the relationship with former Brides member Chris Coles, still in Edema, remained tight. Jeremy Guns would replace Scott Sorry on bass, who in fact has no relationship to Tracii Guns, I learned in researching this piece, although Tracii has jokingly referred to him as his son, and some publications picked it up as being true, but it's not. They would then play Italy, Switzerland, Germany, England, and Ireland to wrap up 2005, and only 1 year after Sixx leaving Brides, the band would hang it up altogether. So where are they all now? Let's get into that. But first, I want to remind you guys to subscribe to the channel. We have some great other deep dives that'll be up your alley if you're digging this. And hey, if you want to help us out, one thing you could do, if you see that heart below and you want to send a super thanks, that gives a donation directly to the channel. Another thing is you could check out the merch store. We've got great t-shirts and mugs like this and super high quality stuff, so check it out. I think all of you watching this probably know by now that Nikki Sixx would continue on a 10-year run with Mötley Crüe, releasing their final studio album to date, commencing with a final tour where they'd sign a contract stating that this would be it, for realsies this time. Then, only 4 years later, they'd be like, JK, LOL, and come back for what many called the cash grab, playing stadiums with Def Leppard and Poison. Mick Mars would be replaced soon by John 5, and many fans have been vocal that they should have just ended it for good in 2015, or sooner. LA Guns would eventually reunite classic members Tracii Guns and Phil Lewis in 2016, and as someone who's seen them many times since, they sound absolutely killer, so go see them if you get the chance. They'll be touring a bunch for their new record Leopard Skin. Scott Coogan would go on to tour with many prominent artists and bands, including that reunited lineup of LA Guns, as well as Stephen Pearcy of Rat, and strangely enough, a very different artist we've covered on the channel, Vanilla Ice. But he's currently on drums touring with legendary Kiss member Ace Frehley. Scott Sorry would play with the Wild Hearts, then his own solo band, and has more recently been battling some medical issues, which he's revealed publicly via his Instagram. He's now married and is also a father. As for London Legrand, his story is quite a bit sadder than the others. In 2017, he revealed that he was living in Sweden and formed a new version of Brides of Destruction with none of the other original members, and quite honestly, I don't think anyone cared. They played a show in Varberg, and a few months later, London would reveal that he was arrested for overstaying his visa and that he was going to be deported back to the United States. With no job and no future plans in the works, he revealed that he was looking for a place to stay and launched a GoFundMe for fans to help him out. That page is still up, and apparently a total of only $50 was donated. So what is he up to now? I really have no idea. He has a Facebook page and an Instagram that is rarely updated, and most of his posts seem centered around him reliving his glory years. The feud between Nikki Sixx and Tracii Guns lives on, though. Tracii Guns would slam Nikki Sixx a bunch on Twitter or X and get blocked by him. Nikki would also respond to a fan question on there during an Ask Sixx on if he enjoyed touring and recording with Tracii Guns for brides and if it ever happened again. Nikki would simply respond, "He ripped me off for a lot of money. Never." Tracii would elaborate on this in response, saying that B.O.D was formed at a time where both members were having financial issues, and that at the time, Nikki asked Tracii to list a ton of his gear on eBay, and that he'd be paid 10% for helping him with that process. He said he was paid accordingly for that, and that he didn't know what Nikki was alleging, but he added that Scott Coogan would handle some of these same duties for him after he left Brides, and that Scott, on the other hand, told him he was never paid by Nikki. He'd go on to write, "I know Nikki as a person very well, and he is lashing out in an abusive way toward me right now. As hurtful as it is, I understand him as a person, and I have no interest in this internet drama. If there was any reality to the fact of me stealing money from Nikki, I'm sure enough time has passed to where he could have gotten a hold of me and made me aware that he felt something wrong happened. But the fact is, there isn't anything to talk about as far as theft or wrongdoing is concerned on my part. I am sorry he has anger toward me, but I'd like to take the high road at this point and wish him strength in his future. Good luck with your guitar lessons, Tracii." It would be hinted at by John Corabi in various interviews that would come out that the reason he left Brides of Destruction was Tracii Guns. He never spelled it out, but alleged that one of the band members, likely Tracii, since it wasn't Sixx and they were the two ringleaders, didn't want Corabi involved in the writing process, and that didn't sit well with John. He would say that this particular member he was discussing was very hard to work with, and that eventually Nikki would have the same issues and would admit that John was right about everything. Tracii's an amazing guitarist. He also seems like he could be a pain in the ass, quite honestly. Just look at how every day when he was on Twitter or X, he'd be posting ad nauseum about his hatred for Donald Trump. We don't get political on this channel, and this is not about any bias from me, but whenever anyone posts nonstop about this kind of stuff, no matter what angle they're coming from, it gets annoying to most people. Now, I'm personally someone who's going to see your band no matter where your politics are, as long as the performances are still good, but I'm not everyone. Posts like that are likely to turn off a huge segment of your audience. And for a band like LA Guns, who's normally playing to smaller clubs with a couple hundred people a night, can you really afford to alienate half your fan base? That's up to him, I suppose, but I think it's a valid question. I mean, look at Ted Nugent, for example, who's on the other side. He's certainly alienated half his fan base. So that's really it for the short-lived history of Brides of Destruction. Now, I don't see a reunion happening anytime soon. I definitely don't feel there's any love anymore between Nikki Sixx and Tracii Guns, who were the best of pals. And quite honestly, let's be honest, the demand isn't there. Some of you guys who watch my channel remember me from Appetite for Distortion with Brando, and he's still doing that channel. It's going strong. I believe he just had Tracii Guns on, which is pretty cool. But I remember like when we interviewed Dave Kushner, he was asking, do you think there'll ever be a Velvet Revolver reunion? And he's mentioned it a few times. Like, I'd like to see a Velvet Revolver reunion. But the truth is, he's in the minority. Like, those guys are going to do Guns N' Roses. There's a lot more money involved. And people aren't yearning for a Velvet Revolver reunion, let alone without Scott Weiland. I guess they could have Sebastian Bach on vocals, but there's no demand for it. Velvet Revolver is kind of looked at as a band that had 2 hits, but they weren't hits on the level of Welcome to the Jungle or November Rain. And that's similar to this band, right? LA Guns has a few hits. Mötley Crüe certainly has a ton of hits. And Brides of Destruction is largely forgotten except for by people like me. I love that first album. I'll always go back to it, and I feel they captured a lot of magic on there. So if you've never heard that first album in particular, I'd suggest you check it out. I haven't listened to the second album in a very long time. Maybe I'll revisit it, and maybe my feelings will change on that one. But let me know what you think in the comments. I want to hear your feedback. And if you haven't yet watched my deep dive on LA Guns, you're not going to want to miss that one. So you can check that out by clicking right here. This is the history of LA Guns on that video, the absolute most dysfunctional band, and you'll hear why.